You enlisted in the Navy in March of '66.
Yes.
At that point, Vietnam isn't early, but it's not late either. I think at that point, a lot of people still aren't paying attention. When you enlisted in the Navy, were you even aware that there was a conflict going on in Vietnam?
I just thought of that and I said, no, had absolutely no idea what was going on in Vietnam at all. I'm an old farm kid and, here in the state of Iowa, and I had no clue. I
Wow.
just had no clue.
When you enlisted in the Navy, did you enlist with the goal of being a Navy corpsman?
No, I didn't. I was going to try to be a mechanic on aircraft. And the only reason I did that is I had a good friend of mine that was in pilot training. And I says, hey, if I become a mechanic, maybe you can get me to be your mechanic on your plane. And when just before I went down to Des Moines to get sworn in, he called me and he says, hey, you can do whatever you want. He says that he flunked out of flight school because of his vision. So when I got down to Fort Des Moines, when I took the oath and got sworn in, there was a Navy recruiter there, and he come over and he talked to a few of us that were going into the Navy, and said that they had they were really pushing to get corpsmen. And of course, we didn't know at that time. And I went with my cousin. My cousin and I went to boot camp together and to corps school together.
Yeah.
So we said, yeah, we'll give it a shot. So that's how I got into that.
Did he mention Vietnam? Did he mention serving in the field with Marines?
Absolutely not. I had no clue.
Do you have any recollection of the moment when you realized, oh man, I mean, not only am I in the military, there's a big war going on, but I'm a corpsman, which means there's a good chance I'm going to be with Marines in the field in Vietnam. Do you have a general idea of when that realization kind of sunk in?
After corps school, I got assigned to the Naval Training Center. I went to boot camp at the Naval Training Center in San Diego, and then I went to corps school at Balboa at San Diego. Then I went back to the Naval Training Center and worked one of the dispensaries. And the only thing that kind of opened up my eyes is I had a good friend that was married, and him and his wife always had me over for suppers. And he got noticed, and he told me he's going to Vietnam, and I went, what? Yeah, he says, and he told me then that, he had to go train as a Marine, and then he got sent to Vietnam. And I just kind of said, well, that's really not fair because I'm not married. And so basically, that's when I found out is when we call it drafted, but
Yeah.
you just get, well, you sort of do. They said you give the orders, and next thing you know, you're going to Camp Pendleton for training.
Wow.
So that's when I really realized that, oh, hey,
Yeah.
there is something serious going on here.
When you're on that flight from Okinawa to Da Nang, um, let's say that the Marine next to you, if there's a Marine next to you, but let's just for the scenario, say you've got a Marine next to you, and I'm guessing he would probably have to yell really loudly for you to hear what he's saying. But
Yeah.
suppose the Marine yells in your ear, "Why are we going to Vietnam? What is the point of this?" Um, what do you think you might have said in response to that question in June of 1967?
I'm not sure I could even answer that because I didn't really have a clue either. I mean, between any of us over there, I'm sure they knew. And when we got there, we had an orientation, and it was like we're here to, uh, or keep communism from coming in, and this is what you need to do around civilians around here, and whatever. And so I kind of had it in my head that, hey, we're here to do some good. And so, that's about what little I knew. And as far as the Marines are concerned, I didn't, when I got to my unit, or my platoon that I was in, that's when I learned, hey, these Marines, they're good guys. And I put my trust into every one of them. I think we treated it like a job. This
Mm,
is what we were supposed to do. And, whether there was any meaning behind it or whatever, obviously today you look at
sure,
things and like,
sure.
probably that war should have never happened. But
Um, Flying into Vietnam, were you pretty confident, given your training, that you would end up not just with Marines, but that you would end up with combat Marines out in the field?
Oh, yeah. And actually, to be honest about it, I volunteered to go to Vietnam, and I also volunteered to go to. I ended up with Charlie Company, First Battalion, Seventh Marines, but I volunteered to go with Delta Company. I asked them when I got there, because you just give them your orders and you don't know where you're going to go. And I asked them, hey, could I possibly go to Delta Company, First Battalion, Seventh Marines? And the guy looked at me like I was nuts. And he says, well, why would you want to do that? And I said, my cousin that I went into the service with was already over there, and he was with Delta Company. And I says, we can continue our service together. So
Mm,
he said, well, I can probably get you to the 7th Marines, but they're going to put you in whatever company they want, or 1st Battalion, 7th Marines. But after that, he says, they're going to send you where they want you to go.
yeah. And so you end up with Charlie Company,
Charlie, yes.
the nickname Suicide Charlie, right?
Suicide Charlie, yes.
How long was it until you experienced something that drove home to you what you already knew? You know you're going into a combat zone and you know you're going to be with Marines in combat, but until you actually hear, see, experience something that's just an idea, those are words. What was the first thing you saw, heard, experienced that really drove home to you in a concrete way that yes, this is a war zone, this is a dangerous place?
Well, I guess as soon as we landed, probably. But the thing I always remember to this day, I got in what we called a 6x, which is an open deuce and a half with truck, and there was some of us in there, and we were headed out. Well, none of us were armed, but we had a couple guys that came to get us that were armed. And you just look at the countryside, and then I always remember it was so hot and humid because it was in the end of June, first part of July, when I was headed to the regiment headquarters, and the heat with the diesel came over me, and just a god awful smell. And when I was a state trooper and I'd stop diesel trucks in hot weather, that always come back to me. But I guess my first experience was when I landed to the regimental, or got into regimental headquarters, and obviously you see all the bunkers along the side around the hill, and you see the sniper shack or the outlook tower, and guys walking around with M16s and whatever. And then of course, I got sent out in a couple days to Charlie Company, and my very first day we got ambushed on my very first patrol, and it's like, oh man, it's going to be a long 300 and some days.
Wow.
So, and I made up my mind then I wasn't going to come back home. I just play every day after that. Just was what it was. I just accepted the day and did my best and tried to not get my butt blown off, and because you just can't do that every day and think you're not going to get missed. Or
First day, first day, first patrol, ambushed,
yes.
and you've got. I mean, now as a Navy corpsman, do you do 12 months or do you do the Marine Corps 13 months?
We do 12 months, and the thing about a corpsman, and it never happens because it didn't happen to me. We were told that when we got to our company, we would be there 6 months, and then 6 months in the battalion aid station, which was back at battalion headquarters. So you weren't doing a lot of patrols and bushes and things like that. And the Teta 68 kind of ended everything for me, because we had 9 corpsmen, and 2 days later we only had 5 corpsmen, and so I had to stay an extra 3 or 4 months.
Wow.
So I didn't get back to the rear till about 2 months, with about 2 months left in my tour. But we were assigned 12 months. We were supposed to be there
Sure.
12 months.
So you said after this, first day, first patrol, you're ambushed. Yeah, and you do the calculation and think, well, if this is how it is, I mean, I'm not going to make it. And
Right.
the reason I'm dwelling on this is, the job of the corpsman, there's a reason the Marines love the corpsman, and it's not only because because the corpsmen patch up the Marines and get them on the medevacs. Of course, that's very important. But the Marines also talk about the incredible courage of the corpsmen and what they're doing while the firefight's going on. around them, the risks that they'll take. And do you think that this sense you had right at the outset, which I've heard other combat veterans express, this feeling like I'm not going to make it. Do you think that that actually helped you in your job if there's a certain resignation? You know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I'm wondering is if your sense is, you know, I'm not going to make it out of here, therefore, I'm just going to do the best job I can until my number comes up. I mean, do you think that that sense you had that I don't think I'm going to survive this thing actually helped you rather than paralyze you? Did it actually help you do your job, do you think?
Oh, I absolutely. I firmly believe that because if you're going to worry every day about, catching one or, getting some shrapnel and taking you out or a sniper taking you out or whatever, you're not going to be able to perform, and your job, you have a specific job and you have to do that job. And I think you just say, as long, and you still don't want to be a John Wayne. Don't get me wrong here. On my first patrol, and there was a guy in front of me with machine guns, and he looked around and he knew I was a new guy, and he turns around and he says, "Doc, we're going to go 100 yards out into this opening. We're going to get hit. As soon as I tell you, you hit the ground." And he says, "Don't, if they call Corpsman up, do not move. We'll take care of you. We don't want you getting hurt." And that's exactly what happened. We went about 100 yards, and they opened up and hit the ground, and he looked, and they yelled Corpsman up, and I was getting up. He turned around and he said, "Don't you fucking move, Doc." And so I'm sorry about that, but
Mm,
and I said, "Okay." And fortunately, the guy didn't get hurt bad, so it was, they really didn't even need me. They could have fixed it themselves, one of those things. So he was right. And I knew then, that's what opens up your eyes, and you got rounds flying all over you. And yeah, but you can't be John Wayne, you still have to, just listen. I listen to my Marines. My Marines tell me what to do. Doc, it's clear. Come on, Doc, don't move, and I mean, after all, most of them have been there for a while. So
sure.
you listen to the experience.
Now, when you get into these situations, I mean, first day, first patrol, you're ambushed, and we've got a long way to go, and we've got tech coming up. I'm imagining there are a lot of firefights. I'm imagining there are a lot of ambushes. How does it go for you? Are you, when the firefight starts, when the ambush, you know, whoever's ambushing whom, um, are you a combatant until that call goes out, corpsman up, at which point you switch from being a combatant to rendering medical aid? I mean, I'm assuming you have a weapon and you're exchanging fire until that call goes out, at which point then you switch jobs. Is that how that goes for you?
Not for me, it didn't, because like I said, my Marines took really good care of me, and they didn't put me in a position where I was technically you know, firing my weapon. And that's just the way it went for me. And that's probably why I, was pretty lucky and got through some of this stuff, is because they told, and I can't speak for other corpsmen, but,
Yeah,
I went where they told me, where they wanted me, and when they wanted me. And that's what I did. I didn't do it on my own. I didn't, when they said corpsman up, and nobody stopped me, then I knew okay, it's time to go. And but if I went to go up and they said you ain't moving, and I'm one of their lifelines. I mean,
sure.
if I
Yeah,
get taken out,
yeah,
I mean, yeah. So
yeah. Now, did you carry an M16?
we weren't issued M16s. In fact, I learned how to shoot an M16 after I got with my Marines. Uh, I tried not to look like a corpsman because I heard horror stories that
Sure.
when a sniper's going after somebody, they're going after the squad leader, who is right in front of the radio man, and then the corpsman's usually right behind the radio man. And so I tried not to look like a corpsman. So on my second day, we were issued 45s. That's what we were issued. And on my second day, I had got ambushed, not ambushed that day. Well, we did get ambushed, but it didn't turn out to be anything. But we were coming back across the rice paddies and on the dikes, and one of the guys in the lead tripped a booby trap, and they yelled Corpsman up, and of course everybody looked, you know, the sergeant says, "Yep, go, go." And so I was running on the dike, and it was Sergeant Lowe, and Lowe says, "Get off the dike, Doc, get off the dike." And I looked down, and well, it's muddy, and it's, you know, water up to your knees, and you can't hardly move. And I thought, I'll never get there because he'll bleed to death before I get there. And I went a ways, and I finally looked at him. I said, I got to get up here on the dike. I'm not going to get there fast enough. And I got there. And of course, I've got a wounded guy that when I strip him, cut all his clothes off, he's got shrapnel wounds everywhere. And of course, I don't have enough bandages to cover him. I just cover the serious ones and whatever. And when we medevaced him out, I kept his M16. And I kept that M16 for 5 months before they caught me. And somebody just said, "Doc, you're carrying an M16." I said, "Yeah." "Well, we didn't issue that to you." And I says, "I know." And they said,
Hmm.
"Where did you get that?" And I told them, and they said, "We've been kind of looking for that weapon." I says, "Well,
Oh,
here it
really?
is." Yeah, but
Wow.
so after that, what we usually did is once they took that M16 away from me, when I carry my 45, the radio man is issued an M16. Well, he hasn't got, you know, if he's got that big heavy radio on the back.
Mm.
And so what him and I would do, I'd take his M16 and he'd take my 45. And basically the reason yeah, if I need to shoot that M16, I can shoot it. I know how to shoot it. I know where to shoot it. But you know, if I didn't have to, that's fine. But it was an extra weapon. You know, if somebody needed a weapon, I had a weapon. So,
But you never used the M16 in a combat situation.
well, I did. We, you know, it was kind of an accident. We were out on setting up for a night ambush, and what we usually do is go to an area and set until it gets dark. And then we move into our bush area, and we were sitting in just a little ville type thing where there was a family or two, and we were sitting in the tree line inside that. And I was kicked back, just resting my eyes, and I just happened to look, and I see two Charlies on the tree line,
Oh.
and I went, "Shit, gooks!" And I grabbed my weapon and went out there, and I didn't hit him, but I had Hill 41, the Delta Company, pinned down for a while because when you shoot it, I had it on automatic like a dummy, and I was shooting up in the air and whatever. So I wasn't a very good Marine with that, was I?
When this fellow trips a mine, this Marine trips a mine, and you're running to him, um, what's your state of mind? I've heard enough by now from combat veterans who say, you know, if you ask the question, what are you thinking? They almost always, they pretty much always say, you're not thinking anything really. You're just responding to the training that you've received, and um, you're almost like on automatic. Is that how it is for you? I mean, I guess the difference though is when you go to the wounded Marine, you have to do an assessment, and then you have to make a decision about what gets patched and what doesn't. So to the extent possible, I mean, I know words you know, there are limits on what you can really explain to someone who wasn't there. But what is your state of mind when you can bring yourself back in your mind's eye? You're running across that dike. They tell you to get down on the, you know, get off the dike. You do that. That doesn't work. You get back up on the dike. You're making your way to the Marine. You assess the Marine. Um, what is your own state of mind? What's going through your mind, if anything?
Well, you know, once I get the call, and I don't know if other guys did this or not, but I kind of get a tunnel vision
Mm.
because, you know, I know what I got to do, and I'm the only one there that at that time that can, you know, answer the call and do what I'm trained to do. So I kind of got tunnel vision when it comes to that. I don't pay any attention to what's going on around me. I'm looking where that guy is, and I'm going to try to get to him as soon as I can. So basically, the way I feel, it's you put yourself on autopilot, and you just you don't even realize what you do until you're done and you get him medevaced out, and then you sit back and say, I think what at least goes through my mind. I can't speak for any other corpsman, any other guy that's had experience over there is, did I do everything right? Did I do enough to stop the bleeding? Did I do, you know what I mean? To make sure he makes it back to the Naval Hospital and to get, taken care of. That I think, and you'll never hear unless the guy is, recovers and doesn't get shipped back to the States. If he recovers there, you don't know if they make it or not. You don't know that.
Do you have any memories of when you're working on Marines, either as the firefight's going or, maybe the firefights died down or the ambush has come and gone? Do you have any memories of things wounded Marines said to you or things you said to wounded Marines as you were working on them?
Probably, well, my first one, and then I probably shouldn't even tell this story, but I'll never forget it as long as I live. He had shrapnel wounds all over his body, and I'm doing the best, and he looked up at me and he says, "Doc, is my dick still there?" And I said, "Yep, you're in good shape. Don't worry about that." I said, it got nicked, but I said, "Yep, you're okay to go for that." And but at that time it was
Sure.
just something that happened. It's like I can see him saying that because he had it all over. He had a
Right.
lot of shrapnel wounds on him. I ran out of bandages, so you get guys that say, "Am I going to make it? Am I going to make it?" And my Marines are always going to make it, whether they do or not, because you don't tell them, "Hey, you're going to die," that type of thing. That's the furthest thing from your mind anyway. And my Marines, I always told them, "Yeah, I'm doing the best that I can. The chopper's going to be here soon. I got the bleeding stopped. You know, we're giving you the best chance we can." And so, yeah.
Did you ever find yourself in a situation where if a Marine asks you, "Am I going to make it?" You're thinking based on what you're seeing, man, I'm not sure, but you just go ahead and say, "Yeah,
Oh yeah.
we're going to get you out of here."
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And you can't guarantee it anyway. Even on the slightest wounds, sometimes if they go into shock when they get in that chopper, shock probably one of the biggest killers anyway. You get into shock and you can't get them out of that. You know what I mean? Especially in the field. That all my patients were shocky. That's how I got a chopper there quick.
Mm.
You have somebody saying, what priority is this? Mine's always priority one. They're going into shock. Get them out of here.
A lot of different things happen. I mean, probably each day, well, of course, each day brings its own experience, even if a given experience on a certain day is just boredom, each day brings its own experience. But how generally would you describe your time out in the field? You know, if there is any such thing as a more typical day than not, what would the most typical kind of day be with these Marines in that part of I Corps?
Well, I think you kind of got used to, especially when you did your day patrols and your ambushes at night, and when you went out. Sometimes I got kind of complacent with it, and my platoon lieutenant will tell you that because I kind of had we kind of knew if we went into this one certain area, it was kind of friendly, and we probably weren't going to get hit. Now, I mean, we were still prepared, but we kind of figured, hey, today's going to be a easy day. We're not going to have to worry about it too much. And even in the night ambushes, yeah, we're going over here, but there's never been much activity there, so we get a little bit relaxed. You're always ready. Don't get me wrong. I mean, they're not going to surprise you that much.
Mm,
But you had days like that where, hey, I took my camera a lot of times, different times, because we were going in an area we've never had problems with before.
right.
And so and if I didn't have my camera on, well, that might be, that might be a patrol you don't want to go on that day or that
Right.
night or whatever.
Sure. Did you ever give medical assistance to a wounded NVA or wounded VC?
I gave, I did, but most of the times, the ones I saw, they were KIA. So but I did a couple occasions, yeah, and even civilians, civilians get caught in the fire too. It's friendly, not friendly fire, but how do you call that, collateral damage type of thing. And I've had to do that too, and do my best. I put them on choppers. I mean, that it's not my job to take out one of those, even though they're wounded or a prisoner. That's not my job. I have nothing to do with that. And did I hold it against them because they were the enemy? No, I did not, because that wasn't my job to snuff out their life or anything like that. It's, that's take care of the Marines will take care of them. That's not me. And so, yeah, I can remember one time we went into the doctor, or I was at the battalion aid station then, so it had to have been in April or May, somewhere in there. And we took some patients into the Naval Hospital, and we're coming back, and I could see a bus in front of us, the civilian bus, and it's a 50 passenger bus with 100 people on it type of deal, hanging everywhere. And anyway, they'd hit a mine, and bodies everywhere, just bodies everywhere.
Hmm.
Well, I helped them. I did, it wasn't their fault, so I did what I could with what I had. So yeah,
These were Vietnamese.
I never, yeah, I didn't like it, the fact that we had enemy there that were alive or whatever, but I still do have to do my job. My job isn't to take a life; it's to take care of them and keep them alive, whether they're the enemy or not.
Yeah. Now this was a Vietnamese civilian. This was a bus with.
Civilian bus, yeah,
Or-
yeah, is, oh my gosh, I had casualties everywhere, and I was the doctor had left me because he couldn't handle the situation, because he's not used to that. That's not, what he was trained to. He was trained to help people, yeah, but I mean, I got limbs torn, and uh, it was pretty bad. For one time, I probably had 30 casualties there that I didn't even have my medical bag with me, I don't believe. I don't think I even had it with me, and I'm doing my best with, ripping clothing up and whatever to piece them back together and keep them healthy. I can remember we brought in a chopper and put as many bodies on that as we could to get them, and they were all civilians. There was no uh, Marines or NVA or anything like that. It was just all civilians, and
Yeah.
it's the sad thing is, you look at it as, we don't want this war anymore than anybody else, and they're in the middle of it. It's collateral damage, and you know, and it's not a mine we set. It's the Charlie's. They're the ones that set that. It was a big one. It was a powerful one. And the
Wow.
thing about it is, you look at that, afterthought is, what if that bus hadn't went through there? Could have been our Jeep. So
Did you participate in some of the hearts and minds stuff of going into villages and helping doctors who were doing, offering basic medical care to villagers and things like that? Did you participate in any of that kind of thing?
I did, just as a squad, just as a corpsman, if we'd go in, and if somebody was ill or whatever, I didn't hold. I know they talk about that, but I think by the time I got there, they kind of backed off on a little bit. We didn't go in and hold sick calls for villages or whatever. Um, and a lot of times, the reason behind that is, sometimes after you left a ville, that's where some of the rounds were coming from. Somebody grabbed a weapon and started shooting at us. So I think a lot of that was going on before I got over there.
Mm.
And so we didn't do a lot of that. And but I would help somebody and get them help if if they needed help. And it's just me. It wasn't any other doctors or corpsmen or anything like that out there. It was just me doing the best I could with what I had. And I was very careful. I didn't give them medication, because that was for my Marines.
Mm.
And you know,
Mm.
but I do the best I could with what I had.
What was your own disposition toward the Vietnamese civilians? As you've said, if they're hurt, you're going to help them. Uh,
Yeah,
but as you also just indicated, you're in the village, and then when the Marines leave the village, they're getting shot at from the village, and so just this problem of not really knowing who's friend and foe, who's helping the VC, who's not. What was your own disposition toward them? Did you feel like you could basically trust Vietnamese civilians, or did you feel like you couldn't, or what was your basic feeling about
You
that?
know, that's a very good question because uh, it's hard to trust. It's hard to trust. How do you know? How do you know a Charlie from a? You know what I mean? How do you? How can you tell that apart from anybody
Because the
else? So
VC don't wear
you can't. You
uniforms.
just can't let your guard down when you're. You can 9 times out of 10, if you're dealing with a mama san and a, younger generations, yeah, you're probably going to be okay. It's the, the other ones. And some of that's not their fault. Some of that's because they come in there and they're in between everything. They're afraid of us, that we're going to kill them. They're also afraid that the uh, enemy is going to kill them.
You
And
see,
so, what goes through their poor heads, you
right.
know?
Tet comes right about halfway through your tour. Um,
Hmm.
Tet, January 68. You said earlier that when Tet began, there were 9 corpsmen
Hmm.
that you associated with, and by the time Tet was over, you were down to 5 corpsmen.
Right.
Um, what memories do you have of the Tet Offensive? And I guess, if you could start at the beginning, what was the first indication you can remember, the first indication you had that something bigger than usual was breaking?
When December rolled around, my 6 months, because like I told you, we were going to be in the field 6 months, and then I was hopefully go to the battalion aid station and to sit back and not have it as tough as then. And so my 6 months was basically up in December, and they brought in a replacement for me. So I was in first platoon, Charlie Company, and I was with for 5 months. I was with Doc Edge. He was an HN, um, and we'd been corpsmen together. In fact, our bunks were right beside each other for 5 months. We became the best of friends, best of friends. And so they took me out, and Jimmy Joe Pennington came in and took my place. And so I got sent to the senior corpsman's hooch, and there's 3 of us in there. And of course, me waiting to go back to battalion aid station. So you have the senior corpsman, and you have him, his assistant, and he just fills in where he's needed. And then me, and they just basically assign me to the weapons platoon, which they go out, but they go out not as a platoon. They machine guns go with this squad, machine guns will go with that squad, and that type of thing. So I
Okay.
was in charge of making sure they were up on their taking their malaria pills and everything else, and making sure they had what they needed. Well, on the 30th of December or January, um, my best friend Paul Edge went out with his, and I would went over and talked to him before I left. I said, Paul, I'll wait till you get back in the morning and we'll have breakfast. And he says, okay, see you in the morning. And he left, and I didn't even know there was a firefight went on that night. And so that would be January 30th. And I was sitting
Mm.
out on we had a kind of a deck there where we had people come in and when we did sick call and everything. And I just sitting out there waiting for Paul to come back off of patrol, and I knew it was getting kind of late, and so we could go to breakfast. And the senior corpsman, Bill Smith, comes over and he says, "Denny, I got some bad news." And I said, "Oh, yeah, what's that?" And he says, "Doc Edge was killed last night." And I said, "You got to be kidding me." He said, "Nope." He says, "They got hit, and Doc was killed, and 3 or 4 Marines also lost their lives." And so they got hit pretty hard. And I just shook my head. I didn't, I mean, and he looks down at me and he says, "We've got 2 patrols to cover tonight and we're short a corpsman." I said, "Yes." And he says, "I got a 24-hour patrol and I got an 8-hour patrol." He says, "I'll tell you what, I'll take the 24 and you take the 8." And then, and I said, "Nope, I want the 24. I want out of here. I want to, be with my Marines and just work. That's all I want to do." And he said, "Okay." So I took the 24-hour patrol and he took the 8-hour that night. It was an ambush. So I went one direction and with mine, and we were up on a hill all set in. And of course, then Smitty, he goes the other direction, and probably about the same place where Edge, Doc Edge and those Marines had lost their lives. He went to that patrol, and all hell breaks loose. I mean, I didn't think so much of it when Doc got called, killed. But boy, that next night when they all hell broke loose, I said, "Yep, this is really Tet of '68 or Tet." I didn't know, there's going to be that big a deal. But anyway, that corpsman was killed. Then they sent out a reactionary squad. That corpsman was killed, and they sent out another squad, and that corpsman was killed. So in 2 nights, 4 corpsmen from Charlie Company were killed. Now, it wasn't just those 3 corpsmen. In that second night, there was maybe 14 Marines lost their lives too. It
Wow.
was hell. And I can't say it's a sad thing for me, because it was sad to know all that happened, but we were way 5-6 miles away from that. We listened to it on the radio. We could see the flares and everything else going on, but we're we can't help them. We can't help them. We're sitting there watching all this. We never fired a shot in that whole night, and so yeah, Ted. That's when it really came out that, hey, this is serious, and it just happened. It got worse from there, of course. But
So Tet came as a sort of a more intense version of what you had experienced in the previous months.
absolutely,
More intense.
absolutely, absolutely. And I say this other thing. I go from we're getting close to going to the battalion aid station. Then they who's ever the first class that was in charge of the battalion aid station walks, because we're at the same hill that the battalion aid station is, so I didn't have to walk very far. And the first class comes down and sits with me, and he says, "You're not going to the rear, you know." I said, "I kind of figured that." And he says, "Not only that," he says, "you're the senior corpsman now. This is your company, and you got to take care of the other corpsmen that are here." And I just went, and I actually didn't want that job, but I mean, but hey, and that just because I was a senior corpsman didn't mean I get to sit on my butt, because we're short of people. I had to continue doing patrols and ambushes for a couple more months.
I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that, you can hear what's happening on the radio. Um, and I'm always interested in that situation where guys can hear what's going on they can hear what's happening on the radio, but there's nothing they can do. I mean, you said you're miles away, you can hear it on the radio.
Yes.
And I don't ask this question to pry or, to be morbid or anything, but um first I'm wondering, do you remember what kinds of things you heard on the radio? And then what kind of impact that had on you, knowing what's going on, but also knowing that there wasn't anything you could do. You're just kind of in this situation where you're hearing it, but there's nothing I can do.
As far as listening to what was being said on the radio, I don't remember a lot of it. You just know that they're in serious trouble. They need help. And for us, here we are out and about, but we can't help them. And every one of us wanted to run like hell to get to them, but we couldn't. It wouldn't done them any good. And, especially at night like that, you're asking for trouble to at least try to go that far, because we were a long ways away, and whatever. It's just,
Yeah.
you're helpless. You're helpless. You just, things are nasty, and it's not going to be good, but you don't know the extent of it until the next day when everything's counted up, and you just go, holy crap. That was a bad, bad night.
When you look back on your time in Vietnam, all the memories you have, I mean, I'm sure if we got all of these memories down in detail, it would be a lengthy book. But when you look back on your time, I wonder, is there a memory that is most important to you?
Yeah, it may be morbid on my part. I don't know. It's just that my friendship with Doc Edge was very important to me. And uh, yeah, yeah, to be honest about it, I think about him about every day. That's how close we were. It's like, what would he be doing today? You know what I mean? What would he have done through life? And you know what I mean? Just such a, I think he was 19 years old, and it's just like, what a waste. what a waste, you know. Such a nice, he's just a nice guy, just a nice guy, and the Marines loved him, and I loved him, and he's just, you know, just a likable guy. Everybody liked him.
Do you find yourself in the same position a lot of other combat vets do, where there are certain situations that they play over and over and over again in their mind, and they think, well, if I had done that differently or done this differently. Do you have any situations like that?
Yeah, you know, the patrols that when Smith and I switched, you know, that bothers me a lot. I think about that continuously. It's just, you know, one of those things, and that's
Because
probably the most prevalent one is, you
yeah,
know, him and I switched patrols.
and it's one of those things that had you not switched, then
Could have
maybe
been me.
you would not have made it, and
Yeah.
he
I mean,
would.
we don't know that, but yes, and you don't know, and you know,
Sure,
yeah,
sure. Many times over the years, I've heard from combat veterans who, the great majority of them, talk about, how combat is terrible and war is hell. They say, though, at the same time, that there's something about it that they do miss in civilian life. It's not that they embrace the whole experience, but there's something about the world of combat that they have found themselves missing as they've, lived their lives. Is that at all true for you?
I think there's probably some truth to that because I think it's like if you can talk to somebody that's a veteran but not a combat veteran, and they don't have a clue, you know, and there is a big difference there. And I think, yeah, probably so on that. And I tell you what, if you're a combat veteran and you're with another combat veteran, you're brothers. That's the way it is. It's like, you know, anytime I'm walking and I see a veteran with a hat on, and I know he's been to Vietnam, I said, "Hey, welcome home, brother,"
Welcome
and they
home.
do that to me too. And so I think you're probably right.
If there's the one thing that you do miss, if that's the right word, it is that sense of the strong bond that you have with those you're with in the world of war. You refer
Yeah,
you referred earlier to that tunnel vision, and I'm interested in your response to that. Combat vets often just say that when you're in the world of war, when you're in combat, when you're in a firefight, the world you're in is a very, very small place. It's you and the Marine next to you, and that's pretty much the whole world. Um, and just that understanding that he knows I've got him, I know he's got me.
yeah.
Does that resonate with you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then I will go further than that. Not just the Marine next to you, the whole squad that you're with, or the whole platoon that you're with. You know, I mean, it's you guys, and you got into that. We're into this mess. We got to work together and get the hell out of this mess.
Mm,
And absolutely. And you know, there isn't a Marine, and I'm sure they look at me and says, you know, they'd ask me to do something, I'd do it without question. So yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
it's just that small group. You don't even think about, you know, what's going on away from me. It's just us at that time.
How was the Dennis Lickweg who left Vietnam in the summer of 1968 different from the Dennis Lickweg who arrived in Vietnam in the summer of 1967? How did that year in Vietnam change you? How did you come out of that a different person?
Well, I guess maybe I made more of a man out of me. I was 20 years old when I went over, so I'm almost there anyway. But I'd like to think, other than I will have to admit, I had anger issues for a few years before I realized that I had PTSD type of deal. You don't know what that was. You know, when we come back, they had nothing for us. You know, it's just like you said, you either got out or you went to another assignment, and there was no debriefing like they do things today. Things, you know, even on the state patrol, we debrief things, and when we have bad situations, and there was no debriefing, or just like you say, you sent home, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of I decided to go to the VA, and get help with getting drugs, and I'm being interviewed by nurses and everything else. And the next thing I know, I'm going down to see a psychiatrist down and I'm out of the patrol. I've been, this is just a few years ago. I'm out of the patrol and I go down to see this psychiatrist, and I thought all this just to get help with my meds, get some meds paid for. Because your supplement insurance doesn't cover everything, and the VA does a little bit better job than that. That's the only reason I did that. And this guy was interviewed with by the psychiatrist. He says, "You had a lot of anger issues." And I said, "Well, yeah." And he says, "Would you accept counseling?" I said, "Well, yeah, but," I said, "my thing is, where were you 50 years ago?
Mm,
Where
mhm.
were you?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well, that's that whole welcome home thing, right?
yeah, yeah, and
Because
that's
you guys
probably
weren't
another
welcomed
thing.
home.
We weren't welcomed home. You're right. As I mean, look what was happening in the United States, all the protests, and it wasn't our fault. I mean, a lot of guys got drafted, had to go, and it's just one of those things like, what did we do wrong? What did we do wrong? And it's just like, I can remember when they brought all the troops home, and I was retired from the patrol then, and I was driving for my daughter's company, and they were bringing back the 133 here, and they had overpasses filled with people holding flags and everything else, and I just kind of tears in my eyes because I said nobody gave a crap when I came home other than my immediate family. You know, they're the only ones that cared. And so I know they came back as a unit and we didn't. We came back
Right.
as individuals, but still it was,
Right.
and it sort of takes, when somebody says thank you for your service and everything else. And I don't say a word, but to me, it's like, where were you years ago? You know, why wasn't I thanked then, at least for my service, whether I was in NOM or not? I don't want to ever lose my memories, to be honest about it, because that's very important to me. I wear Vietnam hats, I wear Vietnam shirts, anything that says Vietnam on it. Not for me. I could care less. I do it for the guys that didn't come back.